Welcome to another edition of Curtis Jones Writing. I'm reading the last chapter of Love Endures All Things, The Deep South, subtitled Until Death Do We Part. If you remember last time, I read the chapter that described the night that Stephanie died. And the next chapter, chapter 12, last chapter of this book, is entitled Life Alone. So I pick up after Stephanie died and tried to go on, and it wasn't easy. But this is the story of that. Stephanie and I had talked about our final wishes when her mother had passed away about 5 years before. Her mother wanted to be cremated because it was the least expensive of the ways to deal with a body. It may well be less traumatic of a way to deal with the dead as well. Never see them again after you send them. We never saw Stephanie's mother after the last visit we had with her in the nursing home. We remember her as being alive and not as a dead body. Stephanie also wanted to be cremated, and I also but wanted that, but when Stephanie was cremated, it cost as much as a normal funeral. I may rethink that decision after my thoughts are collected. We got Stephanie's ashes back in a hard plastic box. We held a memorial at the church building where she and I attended. I felt as though I couldn't even stand. My knees were just so weak. I wanted to be strong for everybody, so I did. I let my family know when we were holding the memorial. My sisters from Washington came, big sister Betty. My three sisters from Oklahoma and my mother also came. My father was dead by that time. My son from Arkansas came down. My daughter from Montgomery came also, and my son from Opelika was here. My youngest son was angry with my oldest son, whom he would have rode with, so he would not come to his mother's memorial. I know that he will or already regrets that decision. I know I really wanted all of the Stephanie's children to attend her last goodbye. Stephanie's mom wanted her ashes spread upon the ocean. Stephanie also wanted her ashes spread upon the ocean. It took about 3 months before I could bring myself to set a date to do that one last act with my lovely wife. Michelle had prepared a small boat looking device to put the remains in and set it a sail. We walked down to one of Stephanie's favorite beaches. We said a touching prayer. We all we had already put her ashes in the device. While we said our prayer, we noticed that gulls and sandpipers were circling overhead. When we set the boat-like device in the sea, there suddenly appeared dozens of tiny little stingrays in the water where we had placed the boat. It felt like nature itself was there to say goodbye to a wonderful, loving woman. She now resides in the eternal lands. I wrote a poem for a funeral while we lived in Florida, and I read that poem there. It's entitled The Spirit's Home. To be absent from the body, where my soul has lost its hold, is to be present with the Lord, where I have treasures all untold. The dust returns to earth, from whence it had been taken. The spirit goes to God who gave it, and all my friends shall feel forsaken. A house not made with hands, to live out days unnumbered, eternal in the heavens, where life is unencumbered. Ye are the children of the light, whose brightness shows the way, darkness banished by the Lord, now made the children of the day. If I stand no longer by your side, know it's heaven where I reside, walking with Jesus side by side. Now and forever, happy am I. Happy, happy, happy am I. Saying goodbye to the only woman a man had ever loved is more heartbreaking than any other thing I had thought possible. It still haunts me to this day and every night. I still pray for her at bedtime. I think that the kind of pain that comes from the death of a precious person never leaves you alone. Pardon me. We had been together 48 years and 2 days when she passed. We met on Pearl Harbor Day, December 7th, 1967, and she passed on December 9th, 2015. Our lives had been great fun, staggering disappointments, and overwhelming joy. I thank God for a woman that caused such things to be. I cried myself to sleep more nights than I can count. I also thank God for her passing in such a calm and peaceful way. She probably didn't see anything of it coming. That can be a difficult thing to think about for the person and their loved ones. We had talked on that night about what we wanted to do on our 50th wedding anniversary, which would have been in about 2 years, but she didn't wake up again. She brought the greatest joys of my life, and I thank God for giving her to me. I believe she felt the same way about me. When when this happened, she had brought a great sadness, the greatest I'd ever known. She was a fun-loving lady. She worked in Muldrow, Oklahoma as a quality check person for a chicken processing plant. She checked as they loaded semi-trailers for over-the-road trucks. Those trailers all have a number along the front end of the trailers. As we were going to the Grand Canyon on vacation, I noticed that many had the same number on them. The number was 23 or 53, and it was the most common number on them. I asked Stephanie why that was. She said, with a straight face, that number represents the type of products they are licensed to carry. And I said, well, that makes sense. My response then caused her to begin to laugh at my gullibility. The number actually tells how long the trailers are in feet. This was like the things I had done to her for many years after we first got married. I had not noticed that she had learned how to do the same to others. She was very good at it. No wonder everybody liked her so much. She was fun to be around. I had been writing short stories for some time and recently published them into paperback books. I decided I want to write Stephanie and my story. The problem was that I found it almost too difficult to do. I thought it would go well with the stories. I had talked about my growing up. These two books are called Dad's Old Truck 1 and Dad's Old Truck 2. My sadness was noticed by my son Brian, and he set up an account for me at a senior dating site. I wasn't sure, but I told him I would give it a try. Nobody was as perfect as my memory of Miss Stephanie was to me. I learned that I was probably building Miss Stephanie up to more than she was as the pain grew and I had to find a way to deal with it. I began to think in terms of the soul and eternity. I started thanking God more and more for the way in which Miss Stephanie passed. She went to sleep alongside of me, and in her sleep, she quietly slipped off into eternity. I quit thinking only about anything but how it affected me. Also, but how it may have affected Stephanie, at least from her perspective. I thank God for the ease with which she found eternity. I read the book I had written when my sister passed away, and I thought about the difficulties she faced on her way to eternity. I then began to think of what Stephanie would have faced as she entered into eternity. I thought she may have felt like she had drifted in slumber and awoke as one of God's angels carrying her to Abraham's bosom, as it says in Luke. I thought about the difference in the ways we think of time and the way time doesn't exist in eternity. I thought about how there is only daytime in heaven, and so the day Miss Stephanie got to where Christ was is the same day I will arrive there as well. If there is only one day there, that makes perfect sense to me. I was beginning to see things from a spiritual perspective. It made me feel a little better. I could not bear the thought of her being uncomfortable. I was on my way to finding peace again without Stephanie this time. I was still lonely without her by my side. I found a woman on the dating site that spoke, and I spoke to her about meeting and having coffee at McDonald's in Eufaula, about 40 miles from where I live. That was about halfway between where I lived and she lived. We met, and I had brought my laptop because we mostly talked about the books I had written. I had all the different stories on it. As we drank coffee, we learned a little about each other. She looked like she was getting tired or something, so I suggested we wrap it up and we could talk later. As we walked to our cars, she made a statement that shocked me and scared me at the same time. She said, I thought you were going to get us a room. I said, no, we don't even know each other yet. She got in her car and left me standing there with my mouth wide open. I would not have guessed that people in my generation would ever have thought that way. It is a different world after all. I refrained from dating for a long time after that. Later, I learned of a dating site ran by members of a group of folks from the same church I attend. I tried it again, thinking it would be better. Women were not so bold, but I didn't think that is for me. I got out of the dating game. I had almost completely quit writing when I met a nice lady who was from my church at a little time before I started there. She was a teacher for many years before she retired. She learned about my writing and she began to encourage me to write again. Since I met her, I have written another 5 books. I was never very good in English classes, and she was very good in the subject and agreed to edit what I had wrote so as to make it look like I knew what I was doing. God bless her and the talent she gives to my work. She has become a good friend, and we can talk to each other about almost anything. She lost her husband about a year after Stephanie died. Before I met Miss Vicky, I had become less interested in living and not very happy. I had lost my reason to hope or even wanting to live. She gave me another purpose in life, and I grabbed hold with both hands, and I am holding on tight. My attitude has become as it was before the loss of Stephanie. I remained in self pity for a long time. I was just starting to get better when 2020 came along. The year started with an accidental fall that injured one of my knee replacements that was 30 years old. It had some it needed some work on it, but I didn't know. I went to a orthopedic doctor and he said that he was not going to be able to help me. When it was first put in, I was told to be very careful because if I broke it, they would not be able to fix it and would have to amputate. I just ended the pain, or I just endured the pain and went on. I was waiting once again to fill the time until I found eternity. I still had to do some work at the house. My riding mower quit, so I began to use a push mower to do the lawn. I overdid it one day and was hardly able to walk after that. About 2 weeks into that difficulty, I had a fall and broke my sore leg just above the artificial joint. I called Miss Vicky and asked if she would keep my doxy pup while I was in the hospital getting my knee repaired. I believe my leg would be removed just above the knee, and I called my daughter and asked her to take me to the hospital, and she agreed. She called Brother Thomas to come and sit with me until she got there because it took an hour and a half for her to get here. I went to Baptist South in Montgomery and into the ER where they put me to sleep to realign my leg. They said there was nothing else they could do for me. They soon sent me by ambulance to Birmingham to UAB, University of Alabama, Birmingham hospitals, and they put me in a room from Wednesday night until Friday night when they took me to surgery to put a new total knee replacement in. I came out of surgery feeling better and I slept well that night. Saturday morning, they came in to get me up to do exercises, and one of the nurses asked me to smile for her. And when I did, she said, to the other two nurses that I was having a stroke. They put me back into bed, and soon another ambulance carried me to a different hospital, and I was treated for the stroke there and for the knee replacement too. COVID 19 was going on, so I had no visitors. I spent 5 days in three different hospitals by the time I was going to be released. I could not stay with my daughter because she needed much help, because I needed much help. Miss Vicky offered to take me to her house where my dog was, and I agreed. It was nice to be out of the hospital and not in a rehab hospital. I ended up having to stay with Miss Vicky for 8 weeks before I could go back home. That year had put much of life on hold because of the coronavirus. I had several appointments set up to promote my books. I have 7 books published on Amazon, and I go with my friend to promote and sell them to people who are interested in reading from paperbacks. I also publish all the books in ebooks that are sold on Amazon too. This year started as usual just before the warning of COVID came out. My friend and I had all the symptoms of what would be called COVID. It lasted about 2 weeks, and we were both very sick. We did, however, recover from it very well. About the time we were recovering, we got the news about the COVID illness. We considered ourselves very lucky not to have had caused a case of that. After I had recovered from that, I had an infestation of sand fleas in my carpet in the living room and dining room. I had my daughter bring me some very strong poison to fight off the fleas that were tormenting my pup. She woke me up one night whining in distress over the discomfort caused by the fleas. I got out of bed and took the 2 gallon sprayer I had set up to spray the next day, and I walked through the house in my tidy whities and barefooted as I sprayed a heavy layer of flea treatment on the carpet. I walked through the house and sprayed the chemicals on every floor. I went back to bed and thought I might finish my night's sleep. That was about midnight. I was awakened by the bed rising off of the floor and turning up on its left side. I felt my rolling out of bed, and I rose to a sitting position quickly. I began to turn left so my feet would land on the floor, and I had my eyes open, but the room was spinning so rapidly for me to tell where too rapidly for me to tell where I was in relation to the floor. I was just able to make out the floor below my feet when they connected, and I tried to stand. That is when it came to me that the room was still as it was when I had closed my eyes. No, this breakdown of nature was not within my No, this breakdown of nature was within my own brain. I still feel like I was spinning, but the room was still. I struggled to look at the clock next to my bed, and after a few moments, I could tell it was 2 a.m. I knew that this was probably caused by the chemicals I had sprayed just 2 hours ago. I tried to make my way to the bathroom to wash and remove as much of the chemicals as I could. I was not able to stand from the spinning. I thought about what I should do. I decided maybe drinking the glass of water sitting on the nightstand might help dilute the poisons in my body. I remained seated on the side of the bed and I closed my eyes to help me get hold of the glass of water. I felt it within my hands and I opened my eyes up to make sure it was the glass. I start I started spinning as soon as my eyes were open and I quickly closed them again. I brought the glass of water toward my mouth and water was pouring out on my legs and on the edge of the bed. I continued till I got it to my mouth and drank all that was left in the glass with hopes that it would help. I dropped the glass to the floor and tried to lay back to rest and gather my thoughts. When my head hit the pillow, the spinning began with a vengeance. I raised myself to near a sitting position again and I moved the other pillow to create a lean back so I could remain sitting upright. I hoped I would not have to make a trip to the bathroom or I would be in trouble. I didn't know how long it took to go back to sleep, but it was a while. I was uneasy all the rest of the night and I prayed many prayers that night. Excuse me. I woke to the sound of birds singing to each other in a lovely melody of tweets and chirps. I flipped the covers off my legs and lowered my feet to the floor. I moved very slowly because I still felt slightly dizzy. They were met by my puppy's happy wagging her tail as she rubbed against them to say good morning. I was happy to start a new day. I wasn't sure I would wake up this morning. I wanted to trim my hedge that I had let grow all summer to raise it from 5 foot to 6 foot tall. Today I would be trimming Today it would be trimmed to that height. I had decided to grow it to 6 foot last fall. Today was the day to complete the task. Reality hit home, and as I started to raise to my feet, I was still dizzy to some degree. I could barely stand without leaning one direction or another. I had to use a cane to move about. I took my pup out to do her business and looked at the hedge once more, knowing that it would be allowed to grow further. I sat on the porch until she had become impatient to get back into the house. We would have loved to have my wife to help me through this unfortunate mishap. It took about a week for all of the dizziness to subside. I had learned the hard way to be very careful since I have lost my partner, Miss Stephanie. I spent so much time alone with only my dog to help when I misstepped and found myself vertical once again. I have posted a photograph to show that I am fully recovered once again. And this is the photograph that I posted after those things happened. And the back of this book just tells a little bit about me and how I'm doing, where I was born, and what's going on. I hope you enjoyed this chapter. That'll be the last I do of Love Endures All Things. That's the third book in this series, so I've completed that. And this book is a retro book which tells about some of the things in me and Stephanie's life, but family history stories from when I was young, from my grandparents and great uncles and such. And that'll be the next one I start reading. Uh, its subtitle, well, the title is Getting There, and the subtitle is Choices Decide Destinations. Thank you for following along with me, and I'll start this the next time I present. God bless you and take care of you. Bye bye for now.